As of September, this channel is turning 2 years old, in a way. My first long-form video was posted toward the end of September 2023, so it's basically been 2 years now. I thought today I would kind of want to just talk about how I feel about YouTube, how I feel about the channel's progression over the 2 years, and I'm also doing a Q&A from some of you guys that dropped comments in my community post. So I guess what I wanted to do is sort of go over what I think about YouTube and what I think about how things are going specifically for the channel. To start, I want to say, thank you to everyone who has watched the videos or subscribed to the channel, and especially the people that come by all the time to leave really nice comments and stuff like that. Really can't stress how nice it is to have even a small community of people around the channel where people come by and just say nice things and share their thoughts about, these old games that I typically cover here. Usually in my videos I have notes and stuff like that, but this time it is fully unscripted. I'm just staring at myself and talking. I guess the first thing I want to talk about is how I feel about YouTube and making content and the channel in its 2-year anniversary. YouTube is something that I've long wanted to do, but it's not something that I expected to do as well as it did as soon as it did. I expected to be doing this off and on for at least a year before anyone even noticed, but somehow I got lucky and people have been watching the videos pretty much since my third one. Let's just talk about things a bit broadly first. I think a lot of these things, I haven't read all the questions, but I think a lot of these things are gonna come up in the questions, so I'm gonna focus on the YouTube part here. I think YouTube is great. I've been watching YouTube content and video content since AVGN, and I think it's pretty much become my primary source of media these days. I don't really use Instagram, Twitter, whatever you call it now, as much as YouTube. YouTube is basically my main source of information and content and entertainment, excluding, movies, games, TV shows, music, which I all love. What I want to say is I like being a content creator, but 2 years in, you quickly realize what that really means. I'm not going anywhere. I don't know why I have to clarify that. But I feel like just even mentioning that YouTube kind of sucks at times, you have to kind of mention that, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not stopping. But there's a lot of weird things that come up that you just don't expect to have. To begin with, YouTube is very all-encompassing, where I find myself thinking about it all the time, and it's not something I ever expected to be doing. So things like YouTube Studio are always opened at any point in the day, like it's a habit. And even if I'm not even posting anything, I just want to know when people are looking at videos. It's very strange, and on one hand I really enjoy it, but on the other hand it is a little questionable. Yeah. Also, I do feel the need to talk about the ways that views have changed in just a few years. YouTube has changed a lot from what I even do. What I like about YouTube is not what YouTube wants to be, and that can be conflicting sometimes. So I'm just trying to be honest here. I really want that to be the point of this video, is to be a bit honest about how I feel about specifically retro gaming too on the platform. Retro gaming is such a specific niche of the bigger gaming world that I found it a little bit foolish, maybe, to start a gaming channel, a retro gaming channel in the year 2023 and on. There was a huge boom in retro gaming from the 2020s during the pandemic that I felt like I probably was already too late to. But I've been really happy to see that there's at least some people here who are still interested in seeing things. And, sometimes I worry that literally everything has already been talked about to death. And Thankfully, that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, so YouTube is in a lot of ways a platform where you can really get away with doing anything, but sometimes there's a point where you have to know where to go. Retro gaming is surprisingly small when you think about what quote-unquote real YouTube is. Like, I think about the kind of viewership that channels that talk about Roblox get, or like channels that do makeup tutorials, or even just lifestyle stuff. And so it's both a blessing that it even allows me to make content about retro gaming, but also very daunting that it's not nearly the same scope. Should you start a retro gaming channel yourself in 2025, based on my experience in the last 2 years and how it's gone for me? If I had to be honest, probably not, but I also don't think I regret any of it. So if you think you can make it work and it does work for you, then why not? I really love the community that has come out around retro gaming. There's some awesome gaming channels that are much bigger than me that talk about great stuff and do really great content. I hate that word content, but I'm going to use it. But the algorithm and people's habits tend to force people into pigeonholes. And I think that's unfortunate. And that's an unfortunate reality of retro gaming YouTube. Bottom line is, I'm happy where we are at this point in the channel. I'm aiming for 30K by the end of the year. Who knows if we'll get there? If we don't, that's not too bad. I'm already happy with the number that we're at this year. Having it been 2 years, I was expecting maybe 5K a year at most when I started. And we're at 26K now, just the other day. You know, I set these stretch goals for myself, but it's not really that serious, because at the end of the day, I've realized that viewership doesn't mean anything in the end of the day. It's all about a video to video basis. If you yourself are interested in opening up your own channels about these sorts of things, honestly, give me a comment. Let me know. I'd love to talk about it. I think it's an interesting subject to think about, because these things are, again, both somehow really easy and impossibly hard to break through. So I really love the position that the channel is in today, and I really appreciate everything that's come through. But I guess I just want to say I'm every day surprised that it even got to the point that it has. Yeah. All right. Q&A time. This is being recorded September 16th. If anybody comments after that on this post, I will probably just answer it in the comments. So yeah, the whole point of this video was to do this 2-year anniversary Q&A. I put out this post on my community tab and let people, drop the comments below. So I'm going to sort by newest, and I'm going to go from the first comment that I received, so the oldest comment first, and then just go in order from there. So the first comment was from It's Sunny Out, and it wasn't really a comment, but just or it wasn't really a question, but just a comment. So saw me from the Wizard of Oz video, like probably a lot of people have, and thank you for commenting. All right, next up. So the first question comes from Starbubbles123. They say, congratulations. How did you pick the games you come to choose to review, and have you ever given up on covering a game due to not enjoying it? So in the last 2 years, I think I've come close to changing what video I'm planning to talk about, but I have never outright given up on one because I didn't like it. Thankfully, I haven't played any games that I've been like, this sucks and I don't want to talk about it, because I'm generally kind of selective about things. How I pick things is pretty simple. I think either is it something that I've already played before that I really enjoyed back in the day, or is it something that I think is visually or artistically interesting that I've heard of maybe tangentially through other people. I work at a retro game store, shout out RetroQuest Games in Toronto. A lot of the times working at a game store, I'll find stuff that might just be cool, and I'll think about covering it, or I'll do a quick little research about it and then go from there. I try to be very particular in picking stuff that if I haven't played it before, probably needs to be interesting enough to talk about. But I've gotten pretty lucky so far, so, you know. I would choose them based on nostalgia for myself, the potential for nostalgia for myself, so if it's something that I've always heard of but maybe never got around to, or if it's something that's artistically interesting that could be cool. Late to Everything says, congrats. What does your video making process look like? My process is, I guess, pretty simple. I don't know what other people that do retro gaming reviews do, but I have that game that I picked like in the earlier comment, and I just play through it and capture all of the footage from that game. I might miss things here and there. If I just need to grind for something, I won't record that. Or if I'm, like, for example, with Field of Magic, I just wanted to play the game, so it was more comfortable to just play it on my DS without recording. While I'm doing that, I'll be taking notes between it. So I'll either write down a quick sentence on my phone and just say, like, talk about this thing. And then later on, I'll come back and I'll write my notes in bullet form. And then when I record, I kind of just go from there. So this leads to a lot of editing where I have to edit out myself making stupid statements. And I think it usually leads to me being pretty casual and, honest about how I'm talking about these things. So yeah, it's making the thing, making the notes, recording, and then I do the editing in Adobe Premiere. Papa NCF says, just want to start out by saying I've been loving your videos, thank you. It's super interesting to hear your thoughts on some of the more obscure but lovable games. My question for you as a fellow creator is, how do you balance your YouTube work with the rest of your life? I find it so difficult sometimes to work on YouTube stuff. When I have free time, I just want to relax, not sit in front of my computer and write or edit. You're doing a fantastic job at being consistent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And what is your secret? There is no secret. I just work a lot. To me, it's kind of relaxing in a way to do these things. So I mostly just work on YouTube when I have free time because that's kind of become my hobby. I do work a lot on YouTube, but I don't do it at the expense of doing things that I like. I try to be consistent, 2 to 3 week schedule. And so all I would say is mark it on a calendar and then, fill in the time between then. That's what I do. Maybe it works for you, maybe it works for me, I don't know. For me personally, I used to play a lot more modern games and I kind of had to sacrifice that to do YouTube. But I also don't mind because I don't have to play every new game that comes out. So I don't feel too bad about it. It has changed the way I interact with really long games though. If you make it a fun hobby, if you make it fun for yourself, I think that works out. But do not do YouTube if it is coming at the expense of enjoying your free time. That's all I have to say about that, I guess. Once this stops being fun for me, I won't be doing it as much. That's the bottom line. Sponge Boba Fett says, that's a good name. Oh man, so many questions. Do you edit your own videos? If so, I'll just do this one at a time. Do you edit your own videos? If so, what do you use to edit? I do edit my own videos and I use Adobe Premiere Pro. It's very expensive, but it's partly used for my work. And so I think it kind of balances itself out. I've heard there's plenty of really great video editing software that's free. Adobe sucks. I hate Adobe. You can avoid Adobe. Yeah. Number 2, what made you decide to start a YouTube channel? I've wanted to do a YouTube channel for a long time. Like, even as a kid, being inspired by Angry Video Game Nerd and stuff like that. But I didn't really feel like I ever got to a point where I was, like, good enough in my mind to do it. Eventually, I realized that there were so many retro gaming channels that didn't do exactly what I wanted to do, which was more honest and just kind of... Honest is an unfair word because it implies that other people aren't honest. It's just like I wanted to make retro gaming videos that were very in-depth, but also a bit more casual, I guess is how I want to put it. I really prefer to finish the games that I cover on the channel. And not saying nobody does that. There's plenty of people that do that. But yeah, that was pretty much the start of it for me. It was a long time wanting to do it, and then just finally deciding that now's the time, I'm good enough to do it, just do it. 3, do you have a real job to support your YouTube hobby? Yeah, I actually work 2 jobs. I work a main job as a graphic designer, and I also do a retro game store part-time. RetroQuest Games, Toronto, check it out. What advice would you give someone who's always been curious about starting a YouTube channel but has 0 editing experience? This kind of relates to what I said earlier. It's cheesy, but just start. Just play around, get a free editing tool, and just play around with things. Most visual design, most videography, most of these things, they all overlap with each other. And if you build up the skills to do one thing, you'll have applicable skills to do another thing. If you learn how to use Adobe Premiere, it'll probably help you to go use whatever, Vegas Pro or something. If you're using Photoshop, it'll help you use other programs for photo editing. So the easiest thing, and everyone's going to tell you this, I think, is just get started. And now is the best time to plant a tree or whatever. Sparky Upstart says, you've got some rad art on your Instagram. Would you ever want to incorporate that into your videos? Which creators do you feel are your inspirations and influences? Okay, multiple questions again. You've got rad art on your Instagram. So yeah, I did illustration. I originally did illustration in university, and so I do have some art on my Instagram. Down in the comments, it's there if you want to follow the link tree. I don't really post art very often, but would I want to ever incorporate that in my videos? Maybe. I did a thing during the pandemic where I drew all the Pokemon from memory, and that's on the Instagram. And I thought about doing a video of the 3rd generation, but I never ended up doing that just because I didn't feel like I don't know. It's just a lot of work. It is just a lot of work, and I only got enough time in the day to do YouTube videos right now. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much that you think the art is good. I do a lot of cartoons and stuff like that. It's usually more silly stuff, but I want to do more art in the future in general. I don't know. Which creators do you feel are your inspirations and influences? I mean, every video game channel only exists because of James Rolfe, so I have all the credit to that guy. I definitely feel like I was inspired by people like NitroRad, fellow Canadian, I believe, and he makes great stuff. I love his deep dive, same thing, like he really gets to the bottom of these things and talks about, but more of like platformers. Yeah, so I guess I was very much inspired by those people, and I was also really inspired by, this is gonna sound weird, but like cultural analysis channels, mostly in terms of the format of just kind of talking about stuff and being on a microphone and that sort of vibe. So I guess that was originally what I was going for, but you know, these things, they always just kind of mold into what you do. What's my video white whale? A topic you'd love to cover, but you know it'd take a lot of time and effort to execute properly. Okay, so my white whale is Tales of Symphonia, and it's going to be a 3-hour RPG review, and it's going to talk about everything. I've never done the post-game battle in that game. I would do the post-game battle. I would probably 100% the whole game, and it would be an absolute monster of a video, but that's one of my favorite games of all time. And it would just take way too much time to do. I don't know. I told myself maybe next year, but that video is easily going to be at least 2 hours long. An hour talking about the story. I could spend a half hour just talking about the gameplay and the combat, and then another half hour just rambling. Yeah, Tales of Symphonia. If that video comes out and you look at that time bar and it's less than 2 hours, something's gone wrong. Rezatur says, question first, then flowers. Is there an obscure game that you absolutely love that others don't seem to know about or like? You went back to back with videos of some of my favorite personal games. In terms of obscure games that I love that people don't seem to know about, that's tough to say, because the judge of what makes something obscure is random, in my opinion. Like some people know everything, and it makes it hard to really judge what an obscure game is. But I'm going to give you the most obscure, and that's Ants Ants the Movie on Game Boy Color. Ants the Movie is like a decent 7 out of 10 platformer on Game Boy Color that I had as a kid that I cannot find a good way to talk about on the channel because it's really short and not that interesting. But there may be a day where I make a 12-minute video about ants and I crank it out in a week and just throw it out there into the ether. Banana Bike 279 says, 2 years already. Whoa, congrats. Thank you. In a short time, you've become one of my favorite content creators on the platform. Thank you so much. Appreciate kind words. I know you and a few of the people in this comment section always comment on the videos, and I appreciate that so much. As for the question, if you were ever to make your own game, what kind of game would it be like? I, for a long time, have stewed on a game that would be like Tales of Symphonia. I would love a new game that follows that gameplay style because the Tales of series just doesn't do that anymore, that specific type of combat, the side-scrolling with combo system, but it's not overly complicated like they've become now. No hate, I really love the new Tales games, just not the same. Actually, funny enough, Superliminal was a game that came out that actually took an idea that I had years ago and ran with it. And I'd never said anything to anybody about this game idea. I was literally just like thinking when I was in university of a game that played with perspective when you like hold your hand up and you pick something up, quote unquote, that's far away, and that sort of perspective play. And Superliminal kind of is that game. So yeah, I guess that would be one of the games I would make. Emilio Sanchez 4610 says, congratulations, man. Question, what is your most disliked genre in gaming and why? I personally can't stand horror where you can't defend yourself because running away and waiting for the monster is not fun anymore. Is it fair to say that I don't hate any genres? I might not like every game in a genre, but I don't dislike everything or any specific thing. If I had to be honest, if I had to say, I don't know if it counts as a genre, but I'm really not a fan of gachas and mobile games in general. I don't vibe with it. I don't click with it. And I find they are really big money sinks. So I played Fire Emblem Heroes when that was new, and I just couldn't get into it the way that some people do. I know that the genre of gachas and mobile games has advanced astronomically from there, but I cannot get behind the business model. So I guess we'll say that. Matthew Smart says, what is your favorite game of the 2020s so far? And he also has another question. I'll follow up after. Favorite game of the 2020s? Hard to say. For me, it would probably be... I need to check, actually. 1 second. For me, my favorite game would probably be Tunic. It came out in 2022, so it is 2020s. That game I've been meaning to talk about in a video, just don't know if it'll do well, so it's hard to justify the time investment. But that game, when I first played it, when it came out, it was so good and so cleverly designed, and it made me feel like this is such an inspired idea. Like taking a instruction manual in a different language and like how you have so many abilities that you just aren't aware of having. That's such a cool idea, and the way that the map would spit you out in places that you never expected it to, like you'd go through a little dungeon and then end up back at a spot that was there the whole time. That stuff is so cool. Tunic, probably my favorite game in 2020s. Maybe something more mainstream, the Final Fantasy VII remakes, probably. Number 2, has your opinion on the Analogue Pocket changed since your original video? I don't know exactly what I said about it, but I can just give my opinion now. But Analogue Pocket is more expensive than it needs to be, especially if you live in Canada, but I do think that it is a really good device in the long run. I have a pre-order for the Analogue 3D, and I'm probably going to do a review of it when it gets here. But the Analogue Pocket, I think you get what you put into it, which is always a really bad way to review things, but that's kind of the truth. I personally wanted to play Game Boy Advance on it, and it doesn't do that as well as I would like it to. Whenever I do decide to play a lot of those games, I do use the Analogue Pocket just because it has the best screen and all that stuff. But I don't know. I mean, it's really divisive. Maybe if you get one used, I don't know, get a used one. Get a used Analogue Pocket. Save yourself a couple $100, and the hassle of waiting for those pre-orders or whatever. So has my opinion changed? I don't know. I'd have to go and rewatch the entire thing, but that's sort of how I feel about it right now. It's a really good thing that's a little overpriced, especially if you don't live in the States, and it doesn't do exactly what I wanted it to do as well as I would like it to. The Real Vito says, what is a console or platform you don't have that you want? Thankfully, I work at that game store and I have most of the platforms that I could ever need. I have a pretty extensive game collection that I would love to talk about in a video at some point. I did put it in a poll once and people didn't seem that interested, so I didn't bother. But yeah, I have a lot of stuff. I have the most recent one that I did want that I didn't have was the Sega Saturn. So I picked that up pretty recently for those videos, and I've really loved that thing. It's a really cool piece of tech. In terms of platforms that I don't have, I'll give you a different answer. I really want Tales of Symphonia GameCube. I really want that specific model of GameCube. It's like teal color and it's got Lloyd from the game on the plate. It came out in France and Japan. That is a console I don't have that I want. Bianca Donk says, do you plan to cover more obscure/niche RPGs with surprisingly good narrative/visuals/gameplay like Magic Pendrell, the Wizard of Oz DS game, etc.? Love your videos, by the way, and congrats. Thank you so much. And yeah, I am planning to do more obscure RPGs. The next one is a toss-up between Opuna for Wii or Fragile Dreams. I think Fragile Dreams is less of a traditional RPG than Opuna, but they both seem really interesting, and I've been really getting into all the Wii stuff lately. It's all back there, all my Wii stuff over there. I don't have that much Wii stuff, but I have some cool stuff. So expect that video after the one that comes out after this. I'll just put it out there. So the next video is going to be Mega Man Network Transmission for GameCube, and then we're going to cycle back and do Fragile Dreams or Opuna. As of right now, September 16th, I have finished the script and the notes for Network Transmission, so see how it goes. Also, if you have any suggestions of niche RPGs, leave them down below because I keep them all in a list, so let me know. Weebz says, hell yeah, dude, congrats. Found your content earlier this year and I've been subbed ever since. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Weebz. And I've got one last question here from Celeb6819. They say, what are your thoughts on nostalgia? Is it bad to look back at the past too much? What makes old games more interesting to you than newer games? That's a very loaded question. My thoughts on nostalgia, I think that nostalgia is not necessarily a negative thing or a bad thing. I think that is just a thing that you have to accept the way that you see things in the future. I try to avoid looking at things in the past as that was the best thing ever and it'll never get as good as that, because that is nostalgia speaking. On the other hand, though, I do think that there's a lot to older games in particular that just do things differently than modern games tend to, and that changes your relationship with them. I think that some older games age better than other ones, but I also think that the way things age is part of the value of it. There's a word I use a lot when I think about the type of videos I like to make, and I like the word reverent. Having reverence for things that have existed in the past is pretty important to me, and it sort of runs through this channel. I don't think that old games necessarily do things that are better, but I think that your wording here, more interesting, is really useful, because saying that things are more interesting is definitely the way I see it as well. What makes things more interesting in older games? I think it's more the experimentation. Even the most experimental indie games are still being built on the backs of things that happened 10 plus 20 years ago. And a lot of newer games, they can't capture that same thing without being inspired by those things. There's something about a lot of older games, especially in the late 90s to mid 2000s, where I think that they were very willing to make mistakes, and they didn't think about, this is going to sound like a bad thing, but they didn't think about you as a player as much. A lot of older games, they don't think about whether this thing might be frustrating to you. They usually seem to come from the point of, I'm just going to do this because I think it's interesting and we're just going to mess around with it and throw it in there. And I think that there's a lot of value to that. Newer games have a lot of really great stuff, and I think visually indie games crush it constantly. The vibes and everything can be so well constructed in modern games, but the older games tend to have stuff that I think you can learn a lot from. Yeah, so some of my favorite games that I've talked about on the channel, like Magic Pen Gel, Wizard of Oz, Feel the Magic, a lot of those games just do weird, interesting stuff that newer games would be afraid to do because it would be a bad decision. Magic Pen Gel has, for example, not the greatest combat system, but they did it anyway because they probably thought it was good enough, and they didn't really care about that aspect of the game. I also really like how older games just tend to do one thing really well, and I tend to prefer that even in the newer games that I play today, where if you do 100 things, pretty good, I'm not really that interested. Where older games will, be 5 hours long and just be really cool at what it does. That was super rambly, and probably all these question answers were probably super rambly, but I hope that sort of clears up how I think about nostalgia and retro games. So that's the last question, and I just want to say one more last time, thank you so much for dropping all of those comments and questions in the post. This is really fun for me, and some of those were really interesting to think about. I'm going to be working on the next few videos, like I said, the Mega Man, and then probably a Wii RPG video, and keep an eye out for those in the coming month. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. 2 years in, I feel like we've come so far, but there's still so much more to go. So thank you for coming by and sticking around for the videos. And this is probably gonna be a super long, rambly video, but I hope you really liked watching this. This is really cool to do. If somehow you're watching this and you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel. And if you have any thoughts about what we said along the way here, leave them in the comments. Here's to year 3. Bye.